One Piece, Jesus, the Lion, and the Lamb. I have to talk about this because you guys know we're obsessing about everything to do with a lot of topics on this channel at the moment, particularly One Piece, always the Lord, of course, and particularly the times of Noah, the end times, what's happening right now, the Great Cleansing, yada, yada, yada. And I today wanted to just touch on something that somebody else pointed out when I was doing my deep dive, as I've been doing my deep dive about all things One Piece, and that is the ships the Straw Hats are on. So the Straw Hat Pirates are, of course, the ship that the Straw Hats, as in the pirate crew for Luffy. I'm saying this for the sake of people who are unfamiliar with One Piece who may still want to know what's the goings on. Their ship, they're called the Straw Hat Pirates, obviously because Luffy wears a straw hat and he's the captain, yada, yada, yada. And I just wanted to talk about how, once again, it's a beautiful depiction of Jesus Christ in the ships, though, not so much in the characters. And somebody kind of touched on this concept because their first ship that they had, it was called the Going Merry, was actually a lamb, like a little lamb. And their current ship has a lion at the front. So the first ship had a little lamb at the front and the second has a lion. And the Bible talks about how Jesus is the lion and the lamb. And I want to connect the storyline with how it actually connects with the Bible completely. There's no way Oda doesn't believe Jesus is Lord. Like, there's no way. But anyway, Oda's the writer of One Piece. Anyways, let's continue. So in One Piece, when they start out on the Going Merry, which they get courtesy of one of the guys on the ship, Usopp, it's a smallish boat, right? At this point, they're new pirates. They're just setting out, and they haven't really done anything that serious yet. They needed a ship because prior to that, Luffy had literally a tiny, like, little boat that could fit like him and just a couple of people. He needed a ship, and I believe was Usopp the third of the people they picked up, because it was, first of all, Zoro was his first crewmate. Oh, I should do a whole video on Zoro. I love Roronoa Zoro. He might be my favorite character in all of anime, for all the animes I've seen so far. But so not Zoro. So they have this ship and it's called the Going Merry, right? And the time when they let go of the Going Merry was actually one of my favorite story arcs, which is Water 7. And they come to a yard where there's a whole bunch of ships, like people that are known to build ships and different things like that. And ironically, the ship that they're going to have built for them is going to be built from the Adam tree, because there's two trees in One Piece. One isn't that there's a lot of these trees, one of which is the Adam tree, which is known to have like the strongest, most resilient wood possible. Interesting. And then there's also the sun tree, which is called the Eve tree, which is suspected that that's where all the devil fruits come from. Again, another reference back to the Bible, another reference back to Eve. And the devil fruits, of course, are how they get their powers, how Luffy develops his gum powers, which we now know has even more levels to it because it may have been used previously by a previous Messiah type character that came along to free the slaves. Now I'm going to relate this all to the Bible, so just run with me here, okay? So when they come off at Water 7, they pick up another at this point. This is hundreds of episodes later, I believe. And the Going Merry still, they've been going. They've picked up a few other people, and then they pick up Frankie, who's also a builder, and he's also half cyborg because he almost it's a really sad story, actually, what happened to him. But nevertheless, he was the one who knew about this. He is an incredible builder. He's been building his whole life, and he ends up being on the Straw Hats crew. And basically he says, and they all come to the understanding that this boat can't do what this boat needs to do anymore. We're going to need to let it go. And he's like, hey, look, I can build you guys the best boat possible. And they all support him and everything. And he builds them this new boat that they're going to go out on, right? Which they're still using that same boat till now. But here's the thing. The boat itself actually dies to save the crewmates. And it's quite funny because somebody likened that to Jesus dying for our sins. And that's so true, that Jesus died as a sacrifice for us to protect our lives. In the same way that the ship, in a lot of instances, whether they wanted to acknowledge it or not, which there was a whole falling out, and it was actually a massive pivotal point for them as a crew, because obviously Usopp, who was the one who got them the boat in the first place, was massively attached to the boat and didn't want to let it go. And they also all had grown such a loving for the boat and appreciation because they've been on all these voyages together with this boat. But there was also the underlying tones that this boat had to go. It had to die because this boat wasn't going to be able to do what the coming boat is going to be able to do for them, because they were going to go to all these crazy places, which we now know that the next places they ended up going all the way to an island in the sky, which they did through the water on that boat. They ended up going all the way to an island deep in the middle of the water, which again, they did all in the water on that same boat, this new boat that they ended up having. And if you want to figure out how that all happens and how they explain it, it's really, really quite fascinating, I think, especially as a scientist. But I just love that, because that so much to me reminds me of the nature of Jesus in all of this and in all of just where we're at now as a society. So much of people and so much of Christians even today think about Jesus, the lamb, right? The lamb that was slain, right? The lamb, like a baby sheep, like just like their first boat. And what they didn't realize, which is also what people don't realize today, is that them having to let go of that boat and them having to upgrade, and the conversations that took place, because there was an argument that basically happened between Luffy, the captain, and Usopp, the one who got the boat, which was he didn't want to get rid of the boat and he defied the captain, essentially. And they got into a huge argument and it was really ugly. And I was definitely crying because I was like, how can you guys be fighting? And Usopp was really irritating me more than ever. At that point, a lot of people get annoyed with the character of Usopp. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Up until that point, I was like, nah, there's no way you go against your captain. Zoro is one of the most incredible warriors out there, and he would not lay a finger to try and hurt Luffy on purpose. And you really are out here trying to hurt Luffy because of this boat. And Luffy's already said, look, we have to do this. It's for the betterment of everyone. And also, he's the captain. This is the ship you're on. Like, you got to respect the hierarchy. So Zoro being Zoro, you know, my favorite, comes into Luffy, because Luffy wants to just let Usopp back on the ship without Usopp showing the due respect to his captain. And Zoro's like, you can't do that because we've all made an agreement that you're the captain and he can't speak to you like that. He needs to apologize, because Usopp obviously feels bad and comes to beg to be back on the ship when they get onto the new ship or whatever. And I think he even tries to save the old ship. But Zoro's like, he needs to apologize. We're not just kids playing games, we're pirates. And this is what I'm saying. It's like a pivotal moment, similar to like the pivotal moment of Jesus dying. And I know that sounds insane, but I'm going to explain what I mean. Because at the moment when Jesus has actually died, right? And he leaves, and we find ourselves in the book of Acts. And I find reading the book of Acts chapter 1 to be such an interesting book to read, because you find out so much about, like, it's the aftermath. Imagine you're one of the disciples, right? Imagine, even if you don't believe in this, just envision being in the scenario, okay? Think of it as a hypothetical. Imagine you are there and you've been walking with this guy called Jesus, who you've seen do all these miracles, who's been teaching you, who's promised he's going to send the Holy Spirit. You're going to be able to do works like him. He's going to prepare something for you. He's answered some questions. He hasn't answered some also. And everybody's looking like you guys are crazy for even following this, because this is so anti what the world is doing. Similar to how being a pirate in One Piece, it's like you have the slaves, then the world government, then the pirates. Those are the three categories you fall into. You're either just a slave in some way to the overall world government. If you're against the world government, you're a pirate, essentially. And that's where the concept of pirating even came, was because, you know, we need a way to villainize those that come up against this, even if that person, because we know Luffy's main goal is freeing the slaves. He wants to free people. He believes in freedom. So even his crew, he doesn't run his crew like a tyrant. He's not a tyrant, similar to how Jesus and God is. He's not running it like, you have to do this, you have to do that. It's like, no, this is what I'm doing. This is my goal. I want to have you here. I also want to support what you're doing. But we also have this shared vision of what we want to do together, what we all believe in, which is freedom. And so they're all freely on the ship because they choose to be. They all freely join the crew because they choose to, not because he scared them. They're all free to still also all pursue their own individual dreams. And also, they are free to leave. You know what I'm saying? They're free. Luffy's about freedom. So everywhere he's going, he's trying to take freedom, which reminds me of Jesus again, where like he died because the first part of where he was the lamb, he had to do what no other human could do, which is to save everybody, which is what he did in dying, right? But then in his return as as the lion, which is, we're in our lion Jesus era, but people still act like we're in the lamb Jesus era. Jesus's blood has been shed, my friends. We need to move into the lion era, right? Because obviously now in One Piece, the Thousand Sunny, which is their new ship, right? Which again, now that I was wondering why it was also the Sunny, and now I get it because anyway, the Thousand Sunny. So you know the ship now, it's like, this ship is built for battle. The first ship was like just one to get them through the door, get them to the start of their journey. Then the ship dies, right? This is genuinely literally the prophecy of Jesus Christ, right? And then the ship dies so that the crew can survive. And because the crew can survive without this ship now, the crew needs to elevate. Just like how Jesus said, you will do greater works than the works that I have done. That's what he says in the book. He said to them. And that's what we're supposed to be seeing in the world today as Christians, what we don't, right? Because we don't believe in the things of God and we don't believe in these things. And we're so busy still focusing on holding on to the freaking Going Merry when we're supposed to be in the Thousand Sunny. So let's talk about the Thousand Sunny ship now, because this ship is insane. And Frankie, of course, and you guys know that one of my main reasons I love One Piece is just how every single member of the One Piece crew is just so good at what they do. Like, they're just so good. And I love to see it. I love a good team. I love a team with diverse kinds of people, diverse kinds of skills, different temperaments, different everything. I love the uniqueness of humans. That's why I hate that society is so like everybody follow this one box, because I love the individuality of everybody. I love it. I'm like, take me into your world. Take me there. Take me there and let me feel and experience your reality and your world. Like, I want to be there. This is why I love working with kids, because they're so imaginative and they're in another world. And so instead of like resisting them, you just hop on in there with them and you're having a great time, right? So the Thousand Sunny, you've got Frankie, who's incredible builder, who built it out of the wood from the Adam tree. Again, interesting, isn't it? And in this, it is just like, first of all, the cannon levels, like there wasn't even like weapons like in the Thousand Sunny, right? I think there was maybe one cannon. In this one, he's got like this system where he's got all these different machines that they can choose, that they can release, that are like sub-machines of the overall ship. So they have a submarine, they have, what do they have? They have like a mini boat. They have all these different ones, because they always all get released every time it's like the perfect moment in the middle of a battle. And then Frankie's like, guys, don't worry about this. I've got the perfect thing. And then he just spins the dial and then they release that, right? And he incorporated something that was meaningful to every single person on the ship. You know what I'm saying? Oh, this is what I'm saying about the kingdom and whatever. But like, so like for Nami, who she just wanted to protect her orange trees that she has from the land she came from. He has a whole orchard of them. Then he's got a whole aquarium in there as well. He's got this like a lovely, gorgeous kitchen for Sanji, because Sanji, of course, is the chef on the ship, right? Of course, he's got high places for Luffy to like to sit. He's got everything in there, right? Basically everything in this new ship. It's got all of these. The ship can actually burst out of the water. So he created this back cannon thing so that the ship can actually literally fly, but not like with wings. And it's funny because he's Frankie and he drinks cola. Everything is fueled by cola, which is quite funny, because then when they need things with the ship, everybody's rushing around trying to find cola on these random islands, and it's quite funny, right? But they can just burst. So there've been times where they burst out like from the boat. People are like, there's no way they're going to get out. Like the world government has completely surrounded them. They've sent Admiral, whoever, and whatever else. And then the ship just bursts out into the air and everybody's just like, what do we do? And they just literally just go over the entirety of the full-blown, of the whole Marines and the Navy, and literally in the water in front of them. And it is incredible, right? And why am I saying all of this? Because the Thousand Sunny was built for battle. And that's the point about Jesus the Lion, right? The Jesus the Lamb was dying for our sins, and Jesus the Lion came so that we could, we could be freed. We could be freed of the chains of pangs of death, and also so that he could train us up enough to then go and do what he needs to do. As the lion now, he's having he's reintroducing himself because now he's defeated death. Now he's in the place where he can be this powerful. And that's why even in the show, it's funny because they're a pirate crew of, at the moment, 9 of them. There's 3 technical, which somebody else pointed this out as well. It might have been the same person. There's 3 technical other pending pirates to join the crew, which would bring Luffy's crew to a total of 12 people, kind of like the 12 disciples again, right? And again, even the 12 disciples, if you look at them, they each have their different kinds of personalities. And I love it. Like when you read the New Testament, I'm very much an Old Testament girly. I really do love me the Old Testament. I can't lie to you. But if you read the New Testament and you actually read like even just the books Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, right? They basically tell all the same stories, but their personalities are all really different. And you can tell and what they even do and what they did. Do I have the notes here? I do not. But I had some notes. Even just about the differences between the individual disciples. Like one of them was like a tax collector who technically shouldn't get on with the other one because of this. But even just their writing style, right? You've got Luke, who's a physician. He's written the book of Luke, and he also wrote the book of Acts. It's no wonder. Luke, for me, it's giving older brother. It's giving older brother who's organized. And he also adds a lot of extra little details that the other books don't add, right? Like he talks about who the 3 people were that Jesus saw on the mountain. Excuse me, when it says that Jesus encountered 2 other, figures when he went up, he's the one who actually talks about that. He's the one, again, who goes on to write the book of Acts. He's the one who's alongside Paul as well in the end, which actually turns out to be highly important because at some point Paul gets ill. Just so happens he has to have a physician on hand, which is Luke, which again, even on the Straw Hat Pirates, you have Tony Chopper, who is a doctor who's like half reindeer, and it's just, it just, you know what I'm saying? But then you have like John and his whole book. And it's funny because John is like, obviously known as like basically Jesus's bestie buddy, right? They're best friends. And why do we say this? Why do we believe this? Well, first of all, he calls himself the beloved in the book, which is quite funny because whenever he's talking about himself, he's talking about, whenever he says the beloved in the book of John, he's talking about himself, the beloved disciple. Which is funny. And it's also him who Jesus is like, you want to know this? He's like, Jesus, who's the one who's gonna betray you? And he's like, John, isn't the one who dips the bread next? It's him. And then John's like, and Jesus is like, and then John's like, that's how it happened. Now I'm joking. That's how I envision it. Like them having that little, because they were close, which is also why, the Bible talks about how, becoming a friend of God, the Lord shares his secrets with his friends. You know what I'm saying? Kind of thing. And then you have Matthew. Matthew's a hard one. And I think Matthew is the tax collector, which explains why he's so like detailed in the way that he structures the way of the writing of the books of Matthew, because Matthew is a long book and there's a lot of information, the parable of this, the explanation. He can tell he's got into that kind of thing. He's very analytical style of, whereas in terms of Luke is the physician, he's more like detailed and prescriptive and observational. Matthew is more so analytical and explaining what he has to do, probably because of collecting taxes and having to defend himself and the people that hate him purely because of the fact that he's a tax collector. Then you have Mark, who I kind of envision is just kind of like the young one who's happy to be here, who kind of has more of a like childlike, almost free thinking way of determining events. It's kind of simple to understand, maybe with less of what the other books have, which is again why I believe that I did Mark's Gospel as part of religious studies I went to Catholic secondary school, which again I think the Catholic Church likes the Book of Mark because a lot of it is is less details than the other books that might present some concepts they don't want to have to talk about. So I think they like the Book of Mark for that reason. But I also think that for that reason, Mark is also just an interesting perspective as well. So again, like what I'm saying about the team element and all of this and like how God does things and how the team works and how it's all done in one piece. It's kind of like now Jesus comes back as the lion. He's like, you've now all been equipped. You all now know what you need to know. And now this is real. Like Jesus is gone. Jesus is going to come back. But you now have to do your part of this. And you need to step up in your level. And then I find it also interesting that in the midst of all of this, that they then ended up all going off in their individually for 2 years. And they each trained in their own area so they would become better. Zoro went and became trained with the current greatest swordsman in the entire world. Nami was with the guy, I think it was in Weatheria. who was teaching her about the weather, because she's all about the weather. She's also the navigator. You know, Tony Chopper went to find out about more things to do with the medicine and whatnot and what have you. Brooke was living as a rock star. He developed his rock music to be able to also use his powers as well. Luffy was learning how to use Haki, which is basically like a super high level, like energy version of just like basically the highest level people. It's hard to explain what Haki is. But it does things like you can hurt people without touching them. So you could hurt somebody on the inside without piercing their outer skin, even if their outer skin is like all this cool stuff, or know something's going to happen a couple of seconds before it's going to happen. So it's a way to take on like huge beasts. So like Luffy was doing that, and he was preparing and all of this, and I just love it. And it's like, then they all come back together. They're on this ship. There's just like 9 of them on this ship, taking on the entirety of the government, taking on the entirety of all these big high level pirates. Just the 9 of them on this one ship, the Thousand Sunny, which is after a lion, which for me is exactly the prophecy of God, and like how no matter what, because Jesus died and now he came back as the lion, right? When you're on his team, it doesn't matter what the circumstances look like. It doesn't matter how much bigger the forces around you seem. You will be victorious because Jesus is the lion that came. He is the one who came to destroy all. He's the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the commander-in-chief of the Lord's army. He did what needed to be done, which is defeated death. And now all we're to do is to follow in his footsteps, follow his ways, and walk in power against the kingdom of darkness. Have no fear, because we now have freedom, and we are now a message of freedom. And I just love the concept of Luffy being like this boat that sails the waters of the entire world, goes to all these planets with a message of freedom, which is what I believe is our job as believers. Is we're supposed to be freeing the slaves. We're supposed to be going around like how Luffy does and saying, you don't have to live like this. Your life doesn't have to look like that. Because Jesus died on the cross so that no matter what has happened, no matter what came before, no matter what comes now, no matter what you do tomorrow, Jesus's blood is strong enough for all of it and even more, right? And it is freely available to all, because freedom is for everyone. And that is the message that Luffy has. And that's why I just love One Piece, because I'm like, yes, freedom is for everyone. And that's the one thing that the enemy doesn't want us to know, is that freedom is for everyone. The enemy has to go. This is why the visual of just seeing like this ship, the Thousand Sunny, jumping just right over the entirety of the world government's army being sent right against them, is a perfect visual that what we see, the Bible says, trust in the Lord your God with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll make straight your path. What we see and what's real are two different things. The government thinks we're just going to keep sending out another bigger admiral, another bigger vice, whoever, right? We're going to just send out bigger warships. We're going to send out this. And they consistently think that from a worldly perspective, that's enough. And they're getting beaten by 9 kids on a freaking boat with a big, cheesy, cute looking lion at the front. And that's what they're getting beaten by. And they're all here with all their cannons, throwing this and throwing that, right? Trying to take this ship out. And these guys are just chilling on the seas. The 9 of them. Against all of these governments, against some of the biggest fleets of this many thousand fleets. And Luffy gains his followers not because he's begging for them and not because he's a tyrant, but people consistently want to follow him because he walks out his message. And that's exactly what Jesus has taught us, is that if you just be like I am, if you just be like Christ, if you just love like Christ in the world, you will then, people will be attracted to that. You don't need to shove it down anybody's throat, because they will see what you're about. They'll catch the vibe and they'll want to be a part of it. So Luffy technically has a 5,000 man fleet also of other pirates and things, which include giants as well, of people who've just been so inspired along the way. Ancient weapon people and all sorts. You know why? Because he's just walked his message of freedom for everybody. And that in and of itself, and I just love it. I love it. Anyways, guys, I'm going to leave that there. I've been talking for forever on this video. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this, because if life's a game, let's play to win. God bless you all. God loves you. I love you. And I'll see you in my next one.